A very good afternoon to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this session on I Have a Dream, our India at 100 Fireside series, which, in a way brings together not only visionary leaders from different walks of life, but their experiences, their insights, their aspirations for an India of 2047. And, today we are so privileged to have with us someone who is, I am very confident, going to be the face of India, which he already is today, but an increasingly important face of India for the world, because India's position in the world will also change radically over the next 2 decades. Aryaman Birla. Aryaman, very warm welcome to you on this wonderful discussion that we will have about the future of Bharat, the future of India, and how the best version of India can be built, together, collectively, collaboratively, keeping all the non-negotiables of what a country like India needs to be able to grow and realize this big dream and ambition, which has never happened in the history of mankind. Never has a 1.4 billion population, democratically elected country transformed itself from a developing country to a developed country. And I think that's the bridge that we are going to see, India move in, over the next 20 years. And, as the India at 100 Foundation, as CII, which has championed this initiative right from 2007 when India turned 60 to India at 75 and now towards India at 100, created a mechanism or a formula or what is that inner strength or latent potential of India that needs to unlock as we get there. And really wonderful to have you here to share your views. You're a Harvard graduate, a cricketer. We were just talking a little bit earlier. You're so much in the news for owning RCB, which is actually religion in India. Cricket and Bollywood really drive this country. And, as a young, seventh generation member of the Birla family, you are transforming your own group, right, from so many traditional businesses into very important renewables and hospitality, and investing into venture capital, building ecosystems that will help entrepreneurship, young people grow in India. And really delighted to have you here, and really
Thank you.
warm welcome to you.
Thank you
And
so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, Rajan. Thank you. Very kind words. So thank you so much, and also thank you to CI for having me. So it's a real pleasure to be here.
No, wonderful. And no, thanks. And we look forward to this conversation. As we've
Like,
said, this is a conversation about the future. It is about, what India can be, and, to have that view from your lens. And maybe, to begin with, I will put it a little differently, but, we are looking at, and, you're going to wake up on 15th August 2047. And, maybe when you look around you, would love to know what's the India you would like to see?
wow, that's a nice question to start off with. I mean, of course, as I think we all work towards this Viksit Bharat 2047. We of course want India to be a $30 trillion economy. I think high level. We want it to be, per capita income to be closer to $20,000 thereabouts from the $2,500 that we are at today. But I think we also want India to be have and command power in the world, have companies that are of global standard, global scale, and continue and have a growing influence in the global order, even more than we have today. I think, high level, of course, we want that. We know the task cut out for us. That's us growing real GDP at 8% per annum for the next 2 decades. So that, of course, is something that we know is the task cut out for us. But more than that, I think there's also fundamentals that I would like to change. I think, for example, I think we want our manufacturing base to go from the 17% today of GDP that it is to closer to 25%. We want India to have a real thriving technology ecosystem, a deep tech ecosystem. Invest more in R&D. It should become 2.5% of our GDP by 2047. We want to invest more in critical minerals, in energy security, renewable energy. I think that's something that'll make us fundamentally stronger over and beyond just the large high level number that I spoke about. So I think those things are very important. I think also inclusive growth. We want education systems to be fundamentally stronger, even more than just the top institutes that we have today. We want healthcare to be, a broader, wider, deeper, more accessible for everyone. We want wealth distribution, to be more equal, and we want wealth distribution. I think the $30 trillion dollar economy can't be the end in and of itself. It has to be a means to an end, and the end has to be that every person in India needs to feel what that means for them. They need to see social economic mobility, and they need to feel like they've been able to upgrade themselves and their lifestyles, and the lifestyles of their loved ones and their families. And I think that really will mean that we are a much stronger country, much stronger economy by 2047. This, of course, while continuing to be, inclusive, but also very, very cohesive, as a society and culture, which I think India over the last 75 plus years has managed to do very well. Even it was something I think that not many people thought at time of independence that India would be able to do, given how the country was as a young democracy, not a very literate democracy at that time. It's not something, and not a very homogeneous democracy in terms of culture and society. So I think that's something that is very much in the fabric of us as a nation, and I would like to hope and think that that is something that continues to be the backbone of us reaching all the things that I spoke about. Of course, we would like to see a lot more, but I think that's the flavor of what I think India, when we wake up in 2047, 15th August, I think that's what we want to see around us.
No, it's wonderful. You link this to, the freedom struggle. And, at that time, if you saw a country, was united by a common vision of freedom. And, we had people actually giving up their lives so that a country could achieve that. Today we are talking of an economic progress, a
Yeah.
better livelihood for this generation, for next generation. You don't even have to give up your life, but we want, citizens of India, society, industry, government, local governments, civil society, academic institutions, everyone to cohesively work like the freedom thing to make this next 20 years happen, right? And this is really
Absolutely.
the effort of a conversation like that. And we're going to see a lot of young leaders, right? I mean, people like yourselves and others who today are, going to build the next 20 years of India. When you think of leadership, right? What do you think needs to change, right? Or what can make this, vision be realized in this kind of a time frame, in an accelerated time frame, doing things a little differently from how they are being done today?
I think specifically, I mean, if you're asking specifically to do with the workforce and how I think the workforce has changed, and therefore, as leaders, how we need to adapt and evolve, if that's the understanding of the question. I think, of course, the workforce has changed dramatically. I think first and foremost, people want to be more heard today. It's almost a right. People want more responsibility. People want to feel more accountable, and like they're impacting organizations, society, the country at large from a much younger age. And so, of course, we need to, I think, be able to give responsibility, accountability to younger people, fast track people who are smart and intelligent and have the hunger and drive, not in a manner maybe that we would have earlier through a system, a corporate system over a number of years, but fast track people who have the talent, ability, make them accountable. Of course, I think the other thing is that I think the pace of change today is very different. So I think we have to have leaders, but also people in organizations that are continuously learning, and we have to create environments, I think, where people are not static. I think, everything, technology changes today on a daily basis, and I think we have to have, I mean, I'm taking that as an example, but more principally and more philosophically, I think we have to keep learning, getting better, or just adapting and being okay to change. I think, and that also, I think, comes with leaders allowing the younger workforce and people to experiment, giving them the freedom to also fail, be creative. I think a big part of us getting to 2047 and some of the goals that I think we spoke about is being ambitious, but that also comes with failure, of course. And I think recognizing that, giving people the latitude to fail and do that in a manner that's, people can learn from, but yet be open to trying new things and experimenting. I think those are a few things that I would say we need to change. Of course, the workforce today expects flexibility. Work from home at times is something that's no longer a perk, but more just a right that every employee and every person in the workforce expects. And I think that's fair, and we have to keep evolving as we go forward as corporates or businesses.
No, it's, wonderful and very refreshing hearing a Gen Z young leader like you comes from a, legacy business, really, bringing these kinds of shifts and changes. It also means that, a lot of young entrepreneurs, startup founders, others who come or who start out with, these kind of ecosystems on day one, right? Today we are seeing AI-led companies from, being built on day one, right? I mean, very different mindset, very different agility, ability, etc. And from a legacy business like yours, and bringing all of that kind of thinking, you know, bringing all of that together to me will really truly create long-term value, because legacy and, governance and so many other things come from, generational businesses. And we got to bring this adaptability from the new world. How, I mean, maybe you can share personally through your group, how are you navigating some of these, shifts? Like, just from an example perspective, like myself, we created absolutely new areas of business that were aligned for 30 years ahead and folded that back and said what we need to do. While legacy business to, innovate and catch up in some, everybody will take different views on it. So say, for example, you're in, India has a lot of family businesses at different scales, and
Mm.
everybody's dealing with the same issue because the next gen young person comes with a very different thinking. Firstly, your own example and your advice to how should legacy businesses be thinking about these shifts and preparing themselves, to grow stronger in the years to come.
I think it's an interesting question. I think there are two parts to it, right? And the first part is areas and sectors itself that you spoke about that we think, as we call, non-traditional new sectors where we should invest in for the future. And the second part I would call is more sort of ways of working that will enable us and the workforce and the new generation to be able to succeed, maybe in a manner that is different from the way it was before. And I think the second part is actually more important to my mind. And I think that comes down to what we spoke about earlier. It's about giving people latitude, the ability to try and fail, and younger people more responsibility earlier on in their careers, and all of that we spoke about. I think, in fact, that I think is the more important part that will take us to success. I think the first part, which is this hard line that I think, yeah, I always get asked this, but there's a hard line that we draw between, traditional businesses and new age businesses. I somehow don't think that we should necessarily be thinking like that. I think, let me just take a few examples. I'm thinking on the fly, but let's think about wires and cables, for example, right? In that framework, that black and white framework, that would probably be a traditional business. But as on the back of data center demand and data center digital infrastructure build out, wires, cables, copper, these things are very critical. So it's no longer a traditional sector. In fact, it's very critical and quite new age in that sense. Infrastructure for the longest time was out of vogue, and today we're all talking about infrastructure. Data centers is essentially infrastructure play and its infrastructure build out. We're talking about logistics, ports, airports. Those things are in vogue, and so I think those would traditionally or historically be traditional businesses. So I think the line between what is traditional and what is new um, is not so black and white. I fundamentally believe that we should invest in businesses that, of course, have large markets and have great tailwinds. Um, and those can be hard assets in the real economy, though that can be technology, that can be anything really. I don't think that we need to be seeing traditional and new so differently at all. I think we need to invest behind what the next frontier for India is, and whether that's infrastructure, whether that's the digital economy, whether that's deep tech, whether that's energy security, whether that's, as we spoke about, sports and taking India and Indian sport to the global stage and getting the best of the world, the best of the best institutional capital into India through that. I think that is very exciting as well. So I think the gamut is very large, and I don't think that we have to limit ourselves to what is new and what is old.
No, I
If
think,
that's correct.
again, you're absolutely right. And your version of, the latter of more the transformation of older ways of doing things and making those shifts happen, much easier. The larger the organization, the harder
Yeah.
it is. There is also generational conflict on how, who has built the business, who's taking it forward. The boards that drive a lot of these businesses, the employees, right, the key stakeholders and management that drives that. And I think that shift is very important. I think a collaborative learning on the new. So like we're seeing a lot of groups bring in new age startups to kind of bring in that energy even to legacy businesses, because like
Yeah.
you rightly said, the applications today could be very new age. As a matter of
Yeah.
fact, they become the driving for that. So in your experience, how easy, how difficult, are there any suggestions you might have? Because I think this is also about a journey, like you rightly started off, about companies becoming stronger, larger. All said and done today, when we talk especially of, say, small medium sized companies in India, the definition is very different in India versus elsewhere in the world, right? We
So,
definitely need our companies to become far more globally competitive, and even your manufacturing vision, and
yeah.
bringing global scale as well, right? And for that, do you have any thoughts, suggestions, that might be the examples maybe that you have used, that are helping bring that change about?
So just to get the question correct, you mean in terms of newer age or startups coming into the fold
It could
of
be
the company?
startups, it could be new areas, right? Like today, you've taken sports, for example, Now, you were a cricketer and that's how you got into sports, or did you really look at sports as an industry, when you build that out?
Yeah,
Either of the two buckets that you originally spoke about, right?
yeah,
That you're transforming thing and new areas,
yeah.
how did you go about thinking about these, right? Or, how should, businesses think about some of these, areas that's the
So,
larger question. Yeah.
yeah, I think like you rightly pointed out, I from my experience, I do think that change management, of course, is the most important and most difficult part of the journey. Some of these some of these businesses, many businesses are incumbents, are large, with people who've been around for a very, very long time, and there's a certain thought process, etc. And so I think change management is important. I think it helps to, I think, for us as well, coming in fresh, thinking more from a first principles basis rather than an, incremental or a inside out perspective about how to change, what should be better. I think acknowledging the truths, acknowledging, asking the right questions, and getting people to rally around what a single North Star for the company may look like, I think is very important. I think it takes time because it's not only about, of course, it's about getting leadership buy-in and change management at a leadership level, but then it's about percolating that information throughout the system, through people, through culture, through incentives, through rewards. I think it's very tough, and it's a bit of art, but it's also a bit of science. I would think so. I think yes, change management, I think, is the most difficult thing. From a sector perspective, I think it goes back to, we would study sectors across the board. We as a group, and I think everyone has a different philosophy, we have always been extremely diversified. And that's the way we've operated. We felt that we have, as India grows, we have the right and ability to participate in sectors that are nation defining and that have the ability to create value for shareholders, for community, for people at large, for employees, etc. And so we've always been that way. We've never stuck to one road. At the same time, what that means is that we have to debottleneck at a leadership level. And so we have really good managers and really good people who lead businesses, and we call them entrepreneurs in and of themselves. They're people who are taking very large consequential decisions, who we trust, and people around trust and shareholders trust to take those decisions. An example of a new sector like sports, we've been investing in the Indian consumer and consumption more broadly over the last 2, 3 years, more deeply. One of the sectors that we actually, in our sector studies, came across was sports, and how sports is becoming increasingly a very resilient asset class. It's becoming a hedge to technology disruption. It's something that we don't think AI can disrupt. People want to go out and feel sport. There's a cultural element to it. There's a community element to it. I think that is here to stay. Institutional capital, therefore, is also now really chasing sports. I think we've seen that, read that over the last, of course, with the IPL deals, but with deals in other sports from NFL and NHL to MotoGP. I think the gamut is large. We thought that it's something that we haven't participated in earlier, but it's one, actually a financially very sound investment with, I would say, low risk and moderate upside. But of course, it also gives you, the mothership, and all our underlying brands and companies, phenomenal reach, growing relevance. And so I think it's about both the financial strength and resilience, my apologies, of an asset class of that nature, as well as the reach and relevance that it gives all of our businesses going forward. So I think when we look at a sector, we would look at it very holistically. We would see whether the sector is attractive, whether it has the ability to grow, whether it's obviously important for the country or the community that it is in, but also whether we have the ability to invest in it and make it a success, whether we have the capabilities to do that. And if we don't have the capabilities today, then do we feel confident of being able to acquire some of those capabilities, abilities, to be able to succeed in that, and essentially create value for everyone involved. So I think, I think from a first principles basis, that's how we would think about both culture change management, investing in new sectors, and why we would invest in new sectors.
No, I think, again, very, very well put. And, what you said, for a diversified group like yours, something like a sports in a IPL, also gives that leverage to a lot of your underlying brands over and above maybe
Absolutely.
economic aspect. And I think different decisions will drive that. But one shift I think that India is seeing and India has realized, and I think needs to be unlocked at scale over the next 2 decades, is this entire aspect of giving greater economic value to areas like sports, tourism, arts, culture. I think some of these initiatives where young, age people are deeply embedded in the AVGC sectors, etc. We're seeing the orange economy, as we've heard over the last two budgets in India being allocated, resources from the government, creating these content creator labs, because we have a lot of content creators, influencers, young people who are today deriving their livelihoods, not necessarily through traditional jobs, because yes, manufacturing and all of that will go, but as you said, a hedge to AI, right? Where
Yeah.
the latent creative potential of the human being, comes out, and that creates, the livelihood opportunity. These kinds of sectors moving forward, I think will increasingly become more important from India. While
Yeah.
we've not been able to unlock that, well, but I think measuring that as a part of our GDP and growth, is definitely one way in which we can see that happen as a country. But being a Gen Z yourself, being a young, how when you think of these areas, for young people, gig economy, and all of that, what would be your advice, right, to say other young people when they're thinking of careers? Many a times it's a resistance from the families, because still, parental thing will guide you, why you playing sports or don't get into traditional jobs. I know a lot of that has shifted already, but what's your advice, largely as a young leader of India today, when you share your insights on some of these subjects?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. Like you said, I think it's not oftentimes it's not only the decision of the person wanting to pursue a career, but there's other aspects to it. There's society, of course, but there's family and parents. And I think, of course, it comes down to individual circumstances and individual families and choices that people are making. But I think in general, I would think that um, I think it's an ecosystem that needs to build, right? I mean, let me just go back to you said sports. Maybe since that's something that we've studied and I would understand better than some of the other, creator first content economies that you spoke about. But, we've seen that today's sport is a really viable, or cricket, let me say, actually, maybe not all sports, but at least cricket is a viable career option for people, whether you play for India or not, because the entire ecosystem has developed. That's come from the BCCI. They've invested a lot of capital into grassroots cricket. They've invested capital into women's cricket. This is capital at under 12, under 14, 16, 25, senior. They've created leagues and systems that they can commercialize, and therefore got institutional capital, corporates backing it. That means that the money has trickled down to players. Opportunity for players is, very, very wide, and therefore there are stars that are coming out. There are superstars that are coming out. There are idols that people look up to and say, "Hey, I want to be that kind of person." Oh, I want to be the next, whoever it may be. And I think young people then see that and want to emulate that, and also have the infrastructure, the support of coaches, nutritionists, physiotherapies, physical infrastructure, capital, money, to be able to do that. And then parents also see that, there's people who are creating children who are becoming big and large, and creating a name for themselves and their families. And this is a really viable career option. And I think then the entire ecosystem comes to play and makes it a viable model. So I think that it isn't about, I think it's easy to say that people should follow their dreams and do what makes them happy. But I think that's not a nuanced enough thing to say. I think that's not always fair and true. And sometimes people just don't have the circumstances or the ability to do that as much as they would want to. And there are other circumstances that do play out. But I think we have to think of it as a longer term approach. The IPL today is 20 years into its journey. It's still young, but it's given people the opportunity to really make a career out of sport and out of cricket. So I think in every aspect, whether that's the arts, or whether that's the creator economy, or whatever it may be, I think we have to take a ecosystem approach, and end-to-end approach, to be able to make it a viable sort of ecosystem for people to participate in. And mind you, this I'm talking about players, but this has created jobs, and viable jobs, and jobs that people feel very proud of, not just for players, but for a much wider ecosystem as well. Um, so I think that's the way that we have to think about creating ecosystems. And I think that what the BCCI and the government has done with cricket and the IPL, for example, is a good model.
No, and I think this ecosystem word is key, right? And that's how the economic value, comes in, because, what you rightly said. And, we're seeing that in other sports also, which are young Gen Z, like esports, something we build, your casters, your athletes, your production guys, your people, and there's so much, and there's entertainment value to sports. So brands getting to, their audiences. But,
But I
besides
would just, sorry,
cricket,
I have one point. I would love, and maybe this is not the time, but I think we spoke about it
yeah,
very, very briefly as well, this orange economy. I hadn't heard of this
yeah.
before, but But I think it's very interesting, and I haven't quite understood, but I'll understand maybe at a later stage. How do you actually put economic value to that? How do you put numbers and how do you quantify that? Because, when we're looking at making an investment, I want that to feature in my IRR. I
Right.
want that to feature in my return. I want to say that I want to be able to take an investment decision that that without that is giving me a 15% return, but with that is giving me a 20% return. I
Yeah.
think it's critical to make that happen.
This is one of the key, like you raised a great point, right? This is about the alignment between industry, government, and other stakeholders, who are involved in this, say, sports ecosystem, viewing it in that manner, right? So
Hmm.
today, what you rightly said, the player incomes have increased, right? The infrastructure that is being invested to be, to make that happen has been enhanced. There are government, kind of contributions to kickstart some of these things. There is venture capital that is coming in, being very selective, creating the best practices, the best entrepreneurs to be able to do that. And countries like the US have done that. So if you see the
Hmm.
business of sport in the US, for example, so in a developed country like the United States of America, and you compare what the sports contribute to GDP in India, there's a huge gap. But
Hmm.
if you look at the number of people playing sport, the number
Hmm.
of people viewing sport, etc., like it's only cricket, right, in
Yeah.
India, and we are great. But
Yeah.
we fall short in every other way. But if we
Yeah.
are to unlock that at scale, right? I
Hmm.
mean, even today, winning an Olympic medal, there is pride, there is patriotism, you know, our systems for identifying best athletes, putting them at the forefront. A lot needs to change. A lot of, like what you said, private capital doesn't go into R&D as much. Private capital doesn't go into sports at all, or into the softer aspects of India. So,
Yeah.
around this vision of India at 100, which was built, there was this entire, and we did a huge bottom up, kind of a survey, and talked to many people. This unlocking the soft power of India has been a very strong part. In a way, it's revitalizing that, to
Hmm.
be able to economic angle. And I think it requires multiple stakeholders, to kind of work together.
Yeah.
But today, if we start measuring that as a percentage of GDP, of course, define it better. And I think you're seeing a lot of Create in India, movements happening, a lot of young people being able to be exposed to these as career options early in life, already happening. But can we make the shift happen at population scale? Can we
Hmm.
make the shift happen at grassroots level? What's
Hmm.
the support network and system that can enable that to happen? Of course, we can
Right.
have a separate discussion on that, but these are things that CII has actually championed as the new age
Right.
thinking, around
Yeah.
young people, which also
No,
align to
very
their
interesting.
passion. you
Right.
know
Right.
and
Yeah.
and and I think, the more we think about all of these sectors, right, I think we come back to that same, thing, that inheritor of that India of 2047 and the builder over the next 20 years, actually the same the same young, person today, right? And when we think of, their vision, and what you rightly said, they might have passion, but that not necessarily gets translated. There has to be an ecosystem, whether it's mentors, whether it's support, capital to be built, or, that safety net, as we say, for young people.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
um, any thoughts on what that can be, right, from your experiences? I mean, you hire so many young people, you meet young people, other cricketers, who you probably either played with, or who are there, or whichever areas you are tapping into, because I'm sure across manufacturing, across this, there's that common thread of the youth. And one of our big, things of these conversations is also to find those commonalities that different people see, whether it's in behavior. Like, one thing we see is authenticity of this generation is far higher, a lot more transparency, just because of social media. And that's now percolating into tier two, tier three Bharat as well. The
Hmm.
creative expression of their needs, being able to then generate value like that. Are there some things that you have come across or seen, that you think we should be championing more as a country?
No, I think you made very interesting points. I think today people, um, yeah, I think people are more, you said authentic, and I agree with that. I think people are more the Gen Z actually. We did a big study and we found people actually more emotionally aware and more emotionally attuned, and are more open to talking about emotions, and and how they feel, and standing up for what they feel is right and what is wrong. So I think that's very important. Um, I think it comes back to some of the ways that we are able to create workplaces and work environments where people feel like they have the ability to do that and be their full selves. And and another thing I think is, people, um, I think this black and white thinking is moving away from moving more into grays. I think people see their lives as more fluid between work and personal life and what is personal life and work. I think they're not trying to be while they want work-life balance, they're not trying to be different people or different personas of themselves at work or at home or in their personal life. I think they want to embrace all parts of themselves, and it's the same person having maybe different elements to themselves. I think we also see that people don't distinguish or discriminate between what is traditional, what is global. Today, India is as global as global gets. We are a global country, and people are okay, to embrace all parts of themselves, all parts of Indianness, but also all parts of being feeling comfortable in that, being very global as well. So I think the way people think, the way that social media has allowed information from the West to flow to India and vice versa. I think information is democratized. I think culture seeps from one geography to the other very, very quickly and easily. And I think these are things that we have to be aware of, and actually are very insightful learnings, even when building businesses or work environments, especially I would say in businesses like consumer businesses, because they're fast evolving, fast moving. We're building for Gen Z and the younger consumer, and knowing how they're thinking and what their preferences are, I think helps in building brands, cultures, communities that they feel like they resonate more with and they're a part of, and that stand for them and with them.
Yeah, I know. And I think that shift, including, say, gender equality and many other things, more women participation in the workforce, etc., all, you know, very big movements which are, beginning to happen in India and need to scale
Absolutely.
significantly over the next 2 decades. But, with global being in India, we understand. But, groups like yours, which have pioneered Indian businesses going global,
Yeah.
and our two families have collaborated back in 1969. I was just remembering in a country like Thailand, where your group probably was the first business group from India that went overseas and went to that market, and then since then built great businesses, around the world. One of the things we see in 2047 is that India's businesses being, while you are an India business or an India business being global, but global multinationals, right? I mean, doesn't matter whether you're Indian, you reach a stage of scale and growth where
Yeah.
you're too global, very largely global a company, right? And
Yeah.
your group particularly having pioneered that. And when you look at your next 20 years as a group, do you see that also happening? Do you see, of course, the India part strengthening along with that? How are you personally, as a young leader envisioning for your group, and what could be your message to other groups that want to now expand more and do more, globally? Sometimes there are acquisition opportunities, there are partners, to do more in with global audiences, global consumers. And I think that's a big thing that India will unlock, beginning from the first question that you spoke of, a $30 trillion, economy as well.
Yeah. Think there are a few parts. One, of course, is the businesses that you build and incubate, and for example, manufacturing businesses. I think scale is everything. I mean, it gives you in I think many businesses scale is everything, and especially in manufacturing business, because it gives you, of course, economies of scale, but it also gives you access to better markets, better geographies, better talent, better clients and customers. It gives you trust. It gives you access to better capital, etc. I think for us as a group, like you rightly mentioned, I think this is something that I've just observed from my own father, and read about our previous my sort of the ancestors in previous generations. We've always thought about scale being global, and I think we are very proud that many of our businesses today are not just Indian leaders, but they're leaders globally. Our cement company is the largest cement company in the world, ex-China. Our aluminum company, Hindalco, is the largest integrated aluminum company globally. We serve consumers in multiple geographies, and some of the all the largest consumers in the segments that we operate in. Our carbon black business is one of the largest in the world. We have chemical business. Our viscose staple fiber business is the largest in the world. So I think we've always imagined scale to be of global scale. And I think that I would want to take that into the future as well. And in fact, the opportunity, if we could do it, then I don't want to put pressure on myself, but I think we should be able to do that even more today in a world where India has so many more opportunities to capital. So I think we must think of scale globally. And having said that, of course, it depends on sector to sector, company to company. I think if you look at consumer businesses, I think there's a lot of juice still in the Indian consumer. I think this is today one of the largest. It is by population a $1.5 billion domestic consumption market, and in 2047 will be among the top three domestic consumption markets. So I think being able to crack India in a consumer company in and of itself will give you global scale. So that's very important. The other part, of course, is partnering with global companies, whether that's in our example, whether that's partnering with Blackstone with RCB, that's getting global capital into Indian sport and Indian companies, or whether that's getting a BlackRock into our renewables platform. That also is global partnerships in nature that take India to the world, bring the world to India, and of course in the process get FDI into the country as well, which I think is great. So I think being global can come in many forms, whether that's being global in scale, whether that's partnering with global capital, whether that's partnering with global technology. And I think that's the way that we should be thinking as we go forward, just broadly.
Yeah, and especially in areas where, the rest of the world, especially the developed world or, fast developing world has already built capabilities, right? So leveraging that, to then shape the future probably becomes an easier step, right, for many companies and others also to do, as India, also is building strong bilateral relationships, economic security between countries and
Absolutely.
others things, which will unlock that true economic potential. But you
Absolutely.
use the word renewables and sports, and I want to come to Aryaman as a person, right? Like when you think of India's top priorities, right? What 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 worries you the most? What excites you the most, right? I know there are opportunities, but say climate change, sustainability, some places where the pace of change is not good enough, right? Or we can do fast, we can make it better. Is there something that that you feel more concerned about than others, right? Some thoughts, right? Different, and we've got different thoughts, right? I mean, the inequality in India, just because of the kind of country
Yeah.
we've been in, or different things. We've got richness of culture across geographies and languages and food, which we're not unlocking, and all of that is part of that orange economy, discussion, which we can have separately.
Yeah.
But the worries, right, about larger macro India, what would those be for you personally?
I mean, of course, we spoke about the wealth distribution and perhaps how that can become more equitable over time. But other than that, I think the one main question I would think of is how do we make sure that this demographic dividend that we keep speaking about is actually a demographic dividend. I think we're going to have, I don't know, by 2047, I don't know the exact number, but maybe another 250 million people in the workforce. I mean, we need jobs for those people. And I think that's something that that is of utmost importance. And I think that's why manufacturing going from 17 to 25% is critical. We need to be able to have jobs for the young people coming to the workforce. At the same time, we also need to have education systems that are good enough, not only in the top tier, but more broad-based, to be able to educate those people, skill those people, not just theoretically, but also practically, to be able to do their jobs well. So I think that would be one thing that I would definitely think about. And over and above that, I think it's just it all just comes down to execution. I think we're talking about 2047, of course. The potential is there, but I think we have stable policies. I think hopefully that continues. I think, of course, that is very important for investment. We want to keep making investments in states and in countries where we know and feel like as investors, we're going to have predictability and consistency. So I think that is something that I think India over the last 10, 12 years has been able to solve. Would love to see that being a continued and continuous theme. Um, and yeah, I think we just need to execute as businesses, as leaders on ground, create businesses that are resilient and create businesses that can continue to be and at scale globally and think that way. I think that would be the few things that I think of. But I think the opportunity in front of us is fabulous. I think it's like you rightly said. I think for India, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, and that makes it a once in a lifetime opportunities for frankly young leaders like myself and others around me, whether that's in more traditional business houses or larger business houses or in the startup ecosystem. I think we all have fabulous opportunities in front of us, and I think more personally, the thing that keeps me up and um, um, not worried, but something that I keep thinking about is whether I'm doing enough, whether we're doing enough, whether I'm playing an active enough role in helping our businesses and all the stakeholders involved, and therefore the country to actually become reach full potential. Are we pushing people enough? Are we pushing ourselves enough? And that's a constant debate, but I think that that's almost a good thing to have.
No, I think, and this is such a wonderful point for us because I didn't realize you already had spoken for 45 minutes and we can go on. That unlocking the best version of yourself and asking that question, right? Am I doing enough? I think, the human imagination is what is driving the future of the world today. I mean, we are
Yeah,
seeing scale, opportunity where developed countries, I mean, we are seeing mission to Mars and, value of $1 trillion, and so much happening in the world today where the imagination and therefore the ability of one person, right, is being recognized because there's one human being who's able to create massive companies and create great wealth, on one side, and everybody has that same inner being. And especially when you come from India, we recognize the oneness, the Vasudev Kutumbakam, the fact that we all have that limitless potential as individuals, as young people, or even, as you talked of a challenge tomorrow, the elderly will be a challenge for India because
yeah,
we will, any young country will also have an elderly problem. To think of all of these things collectively as a society and do more than we can, in whatever operations. And really, that's what we try and do for India at 100. And we say, let's get every citizen, every person, whichever capacity, to say, count me in. I want to help shape India, the future of India. As we said, you don't have to give your life like what was needed for freedom. You got to give some time. You got to give your skills, whatever strengths you have, and that's our appeal to young people, today in
absolutely.
India. And we're trying to see how we can collaborate and make this, truly a very meaningful journey for everybody there. And thank you so much, Aryaman, for sharing such wonderful insights, through this conversation, and really hope to engage with you deeper, both as
Thank
CII, as India at 100, and really work together to make this happen. So again,
Thank you
thank you
so
so
much.
much for your time. And
No, no, thank you for having me. Thank you for, I really enjoyed our conversation. So thank you for a riveting conversation. I hope it was somewhat useful to people who took the time to join. So also thank you for taking the time to join. Really appreciate it very much. Unfortunately, can't see faces, so that makes it a little tougher, but I hope that it was somewhat useful. And thank you to CII as well for inviting me and hosting me. I'm very humbled. So
no, and
thank you very
your these words, what we have discussed, as I was mentioning, will be used over the next 20 years in different shapes and format to really talk about the view, the vision, the aspiration of someone like you, in 2026. And we hope in 2047, we see a lot of what we've discussed today, unlocked in that India. So again,
What
thank
will
you.
happen.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rajan. Thank you. Appreciate it. See you. Thank you, everyone.